I came across a recording today of Mercy, Mercy, Mercy by the jazz quintet Cannonball Adderley, released in 1966. As the music for this awesome piece slowly emerges in the background, the voice of musician Julian Cannonball Adderley is heard. He says, "Sometimes we don't know just what to do when adversity takes over. And I have advice for all of us. I got it from my pianist, Joe Zawinul, who wrote this tune. And it sounds like what you are supposed to say when you have that kind of problem. It's called mercy, mercy, mercy." I want us to imagine that we each right now are pulling up a chair around this table. And right now in this time, let's imagine that Mercy, Mercy, Mercy is playing. And if you don't know it, it's an instrumental piece that riffs and repeats and draws you in and makes a space for each listener. And as it's playing, Jesus is welcoming you. Come on in. Come to the table, pull up a chair. It's good to see you. And as we gather here, we each bring our own mercy, mercy, mercy. We gather here, as Cannonball Adderley says, at a time of adversity. In the words of the book of Esther, at such a time as this. At such a time as this, a time of pandemic, time of Maundy Thursday, time of Passover. At this time, at all times, Jesus issues his usual invitation to pass over into a deeper faith and life. More specifically, we're invited to journey from servitude to service. With many things stripped away at this time, we might see to what we have been in servitude and still are, personally and societally, our consumptions and our assumptions and our denials. Though it is supposed to be true for Lent, it has happened more profoundly this year. The collective halt and isolation for those of us who are not essential workers has allowed us to see all the things that we can live without, to note the way we have typically spent time and money out of habit and custom, to discover that what we have been captive to in terms of assumptions about how life is for ourselves and for others, to see what we have taken for granted that others never had. Yes, pull up a chair, Jesus says, mercy. I am here to teach you for such a time as this. I am here to teach you how to pass over. The first thing is to make it personal. It's about you. In a biblical commentary, Nora Gallagher writes that Psalms are about feeling and urgency. There are more personal pronouns, more uses of I in the Psalms than in any other part of the Bible. She quotes the poet Thomas Tranströmer from the poem Outpost, that whatever place you are in is the place where creation is working itself out in you. Creation is working itself out in you now. Gallagher says that the author of our Psalm 116 tonight is telling us how creation worked itself out in his or her particular life. There is a proclamation of the experience of God and the personal and specific responses to that encounter. This psalmist expresses love for the Lord. Creation worked in this psalmist's life, and the Psalms gives words to what this looked like. Being heard, feeling precious, freed from bonds, moved to fulfill vows and give thanks. On this night, we are each called to examine our own self as created, And perhaps our song in response might be one of experiencing solace. Or maybe it is more like Psalm 22, which we'll say at the end of our service. Perhaps the words of truth from that psalmist resonate more. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart within my breast is melting wax. We are invited to this table, whether our psalm is one of praise or lamentation or a mixed tape. As we all show up, mercy, mercy, mercy plays, and we are the sacrament, the body of Christ. Do this to remember me. Do this to remember who you are with me. Do this to remember who you are together. And it's our amen to the body of Christ we can all make this night. Our amen to the cup of salvation. It's our amen to the mystery of the process of creation within us, even in a time of adversity. What does creation look like on this night? What Jesus did with the bread and wine, God is doing with each one of us to take, bless, break, and give. To take us, work with us as we are. To bless, to call it good, to call out the good in it. To break, to make more of what is, and to give, to share in the world. It means to allow this time to change us individually and collectively, to make sacrifices as Jesus is willing to make sacrifices. We will make sacrifice if God is to use us in this world. Certainly, there can be suffering involved in the pursuit of good. And the concept of sacrifice in our religious context has become synonymous with suffering and with the substitution of one life for another. But there is also another way to experience this word, which literally comes from the Latin phrase meaning to make sacred, sacrum facere. That's what sacrifice is. It's a giving of ourselves that is bound up in the revelation of sacredness. The giving of ourselves is bound up in the revelation of sacredness. Jesus' washing of feet is proclamation by action. Each foot is sacred. It belongs to a person who is. The sacredness is always there. Our actions help to peel back this reality. We are to both give and receive this sacrifice. We are to show others their sacredness and allow them to show us ours. We are to make this movement individually and collectively from servitude to our own narrow diversions and consumptions and spheres of concern, to serving, to revealing sacredness in all places. That's what Jesus is teaching us. Each of us is to take our part in this revelation of sacredness, each of us in our own way. I invite you now to take this moment and think, and we do have time. Actually, Sister Ann, one of our colleagues, was saying, "Where are you going?" So we have time, many of us, to think about this in the coming days. To think about where you were this time last year. To be still and compare your actions and consumptions last year with this year. What does that look like for you in terms of what you have to give up and what you have to take on to be part of revealing sacredness? What will it look like for you to move from servitude to serving? How can God take, bless, break, and give what is within you? And how can you advocate and use your power to join with kindred people to help us do this in our common life? It's a good time to think on this. It's how we pass over to freedom, real freedom. It's the only way, Jesus says. It's said that foot washing is like the incarnation. The method is the message. An act of service reveals what is sacred again and again and again. So we are here at this table, each of us pulled up in our own chairs. We are the body of Christ, even as our hearts break. Mercy, mercy, mercy. Jesus is serving you. Remember that you are sacred. Remember the world is sacred in all its beauty and brokenness. Do this to remember me. Do this to remember who you are with me. Do this to remember who you are together. Amen.